Any others? Good horror games?
Yeah.
Let's say.
Outlast is really, really good. Scary.
People make of Resident Evil. Any? Has anyone actually played any of those games?
Played the first one.
The very first one.
Yeah, on the PSX.
Okay.
It
Talk about janky. Yeah.
No, the voice acting though was terrible.
Funny.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
They've done remasters, and I
Yeah.
thought the remaster of Resident Evil 2 was really good, to be fair, because they fixed a lot of problems with the game, and there's still jump moments in that game as well.
Yeah.
Proper jump moments. It's very skillfully done. I haven't played Resident Evil 8 yet. Still haven't got around to it. With the big vampire woman. I gotta do that at some point. Okay, so let us go through this, because if I finish on time again, this would be unprecedented. I actually finished the first year lecture on time on Thursday as well. It's like, finally I'm back in the groove, because I've done this in years. But you know, it's taken a while, this shit. A lot of game studies theorists believe that flow is a really unproblematic theory, that it's an unqualified good in some way. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the idea that we can be put into this optimal state by a game. That is not correct. It's not a neutral concept. If we unpick the history of flow, in particular the history of the person who proposed it, Csikszentmihalyi himself, and what flow actually says about us, then it becomes more problematic, I would say. So, Csikszentmihalyi was a dissident, came from the Eastern Bloc, went to America, left communism to go into capitalism. Flow undoubtedly is a response to Marxism itself, an attempt to create a Western democratic solution to alienation, feeling estrangement from the products of one labour. Flow alters an alternative to Marxist modes of social change, basically, by saying the individual can power all this stuff. It doesn't need a collective good to do things. Individuals are empowered in certain ways. So unlike Marx, who argued that alienation would be solved only by collectives, Csikszentmihalyi imagined that flow experiences could re-immerse people into their own lives without the need for revolution, removing alienation, so removing everyday alienation and the feeling that we're alienated from the world, by allowing them to experience play in a way which would make the everyday seem better to us. But this flow state is very much an individual state. When we feel immersed in that way, it's not just the world that we're bracketing off, it's also other people. It's intensely individualistic. That is a really problematic aspect, because if we have a world where we're all locked in our own little pleasure chambers, you have no social action, no social interaction, no social life, which might appeal to some, but you're not going to get shit done. It's the short order of it. Flow is definitely not an uncomplicated solution. It's not a natural state. Flow theory uses the concept as an ideology, one that privileges individuality over social collectives and growth and accumulation over equilibrium and sustainability. So, self-determination over the idea that the external shapes consciousness in any way. These qualities actually are embodied in not just many video games, but also in video game characters and what we're asked to do. If you think about Uncharted as a classic example of this, but so many different ones. And it's almost become the paradigm of the AAA game. You play a character that changes the world around them. This one character has superhuman qualities which change the world. It suits flow in that you're embodying one character through a particular series of things, and the challenges change over time. So you go from being able to do a small mission to being able to take over an entire island or an entire country and so on. But what does that tell us ideologically about the world? If we trace it back a few weeks ago, this is a repetition of this ideology that, you know, the rich, the strong, the powerful, the white, the male, etc., can transform the world, and like everyone else is subservient to the needs and desires of these people. And those qualities, according to Braxton Soderman, really infuse a lot of video games which promote the idea of what he calls the flowing subject. We create, through gameplay, a flowing subject, a subject who can experience flow, but that experience of flow is culturally defined in particular ways. So if flow theory emerges from play, it actually imbues it with ideology and facilitates channeling towards intensified consumption of things. And that's also a really important point. If you look at what it is to be in a flow state, you're enjoying something so much that you keep consuming it more and more and more. That is not great. The idea that you can have continual consumption over time of something because it's enjoyable is probably the root cause of global warming right there, where society as a whole thinks we can have all of this stuff all the time, blah, 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 blah. Oh God, we're burning so many fossil fuels to do this that we're killing the planet. You don't think of anything outside of the context of what you're doing. You just keep on consuming, consuming, consuming. It's, if you like, the cause of hyper-obesity. Yeah? You easily get hold of things which, oh, it feels good. It feels good to eat McDonald's 3 times a day, and it does. Because they put chemicals in that shit that makes you crave for it nightly. But you wake up 3 years later, and you're 40 stone and on a documentary on Channel 5. You know, when they get in that forklift truck to take, I wash myself with a rag on a stick, that kind of thing. Which is probably not optimal, but not optimal health-wise. But damn, that shit feels good, I'm there, I'm eating that, I'm living the dream as I, require one of those scooters to go around to Swansea. So this idea that, you can be in a state of continual consumption itself is really problematic, because if you take that as an enjoyable state of affairs, then you're going to look to see, well, where else in life can I apply this enjoyment? If being in this state where I'm enjoying and it keeps on going and going and going and going is really, profoundly satisfying, how can I replicate that all the time? And you end up doing things, just the things that you like doing. Well, life ain't that simple. We always have to do things that we don't like doing. I had to get up this morning. My bed was like a womb this morning, I'm not kidding you. Right? It was comfortable, warm, the whole thing going on. It's pretty sweet. And I had to break that enjoyment, put my feet on the cold floor and get my sorry ass up to come and teach this sorry ass class. I'm not happy about it, but I have to do things. The same goes, look at the happy faces around the room. None of you want to be here. Morgan won't be anywhere but you, dude. So, and I'm feeling it, and I'm with you. I get it 100%. So, the concept of flow itself is ideologically problematic in this way. There's a few ideologically problematic aspects to it. One, privileges the individual. 2, it privileges the idea of intensified consumption of something as being the optimal thing that we should do. And really, it privileges, I'd say, also in a deeply problematic way, the idea of self-determination. That the progress, it's almost like an applied version of the American dream. If you do all this stuff, you will progress in life, without ignoring that actually things are really contingent on what's on around you. And it's the support networks you have, it's the environment that you're in, etc. Because this is the fucking Molly May argument, right? You all know who I mean by Molly May, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm talking at your fucking level now, okay? I don't know who Molly May is. Not a clue, okay? She came up to me and slapped me in the face, I wouldn't have a clue who she is. Is she seeing Tyson Fury's brother?
Yeah.
That can't be healthy. For anyone involved, quite frankly. Because Tyson Fury is a dick of the highest order. And he actually kind of looks like a dick. So, Molly May's famous quote from, back earlier this year? We all have the same 24 hours. Fuck you, Molly, we don't have the same 24 hours. My 24 hours are very different to yours. I can assure you, you're doing different shit to me, bitch. Alright? I have to come into this sorry fucking place and, read first year's work. That ain't the same 24 hours. I have to go to Cost Cutter for my coffee. She's getting a good ass coffee and I'm getting that machine coffee from that fucking dump. Me and Molly ain't got the same 24 hours, right? Molly hasn't got hair growing in her ears because she's a 43-year-old man. Molly can fuck off, alright? What Molly is doing is privileging self-determination. She's got the idea that, because it comes from that Kendall Jenner, is so popular because she's got the same. Fuck you, Kendall Jenner. One, I don't look like you, so you've got certain advantages to me already. Two, you're super wealthy, so it doesn't work. That's the point I'm making. Contextually, it doesn't work, right? So, but the concept of flow doesn't take any of that context in. As an ideological statement, it says, but contextually what we do is not important, isn't important to what happens. Who we are, what situation we're in, none of this is important. Actually, optimal enjoyment just comes from these things, and we can all experience it, we can all have the good stuff. It doesn't work that way. So, how do you get flow into your life as an optimal experience if you're working a 14-hour shift in a factory? For minimum wage, and you're worried about keeping the lights on. These things don't come into account. It's very much a privileged theory from a privileged position, I would think. So even if flow is a good idea and it feels good, it has to fit into a wider context. Morgan, what's your point?
Would flow come hand in hand with gamifying?
Let's try and formulate that in a way. Gamifying and gamification itself, for me, is the application of flow and principles of flow to everyday life. I think that, it doesn't explain, I don't think that explains everything with gamifying, because there's a big economic aspect to gamifying as well, because if you gamify something, you produce data. You can never discount that. The main impetus to gamifying stuff is to produce data about people who do things in order for that to be sold. There's no question. But certainly, if something's gamified well, then you are inducing a flow condition into something in a particular way. And there's no doubt to me, again, the easiest way of thinking about this, I think, is the education system, which has largely been gamified from top to bottom, and does try to induce elements of flow in terms of how things are staged. There's a really boring debate, which happens every summer actually, about GCSEs have become easier, A levels become easier, degrees have become easier. Okay, since my day, I had to read 10 million books, and then the lecturer used to, beat the shit out of me with a baseball bat, and then I had to do the exam. Okay, that's how it went down. And now you guys have modules, and you have reading lists, and you have a virtual learning environment, and you have lecturers that actually care about your well-being. It doesn't really work. You can say there's aspects of gamification in it. The context of the world has completely changed in that time. Again, it doesn't explain everything here, gamification, but what is clear to me, being in this system, is that we operate a gamified system. Ostensibly, this module is gamified in particular ways. If your skills match the challenges that I set you, you will get good marks. That's how it works, right? That's really, when I'm designing assignments, what I'm saying is I've become a flow theorist in terms of education, ostensibly. When I'm designing assignments for people, that's what I'm trying to do. The stuff beforehand, all this content before the video, is all there so that skill level meets the challenge level, so you hit that high point. If you don't engage like Dan, engaged at all, right? It could be anywhere but here. Skill level and challenge is going to meet at a different stage, right? It's design of so many things more than gamification. This is why gamification has become so huge. Gamification of flow, just like I was saying earlier about Huizinga and how flow intersects with those classical theories of play. No doubt, in terms of gamification, it matches perfectly as well. And there's no question in my mind that the design of so many things is about trying to create flow situations for people as well. What's interesting is how badly done it is. Terribly in most circumstances. Swansea bus station has been designed, you're going to find this really difficult to believe, right? And for context, I don't think most of you will be able to remember, even if you're from this area, what Swansea bus station was like before it was built, as it is now, because it was basically kind of rape central. But as it is now, that is actually designed with principles of flow in it. Now, it doesn't work, because you don't take into account that most of the people who get on buses in Swansea are, lower than human, and it's really problematic. It also doesn't take into account that Swansea's got a large pigeon population, which really has not been taken into account with that flow situation, or that, kids who live in town in Sandfields are going to stab you after 7 o'clock in the evening. So flow just doesn't flow through that space. But there's no question in my mind, when you look at the principles of the architectural design in it, it's all about flow. It's all about people being able to flow from place to place unproblematically. I mean, Swansea is a huge number of flow solutions that don't work. It's like other cities, I'm assuming there's cities in the world that it does work, but Swansea ain't one of them, that's for sure. So, too long didn't listen. Yes. Is the answer to the question. So, video games seem unproblematic in terms of flow, but what we need to do, we can't accept these things as like innocent and enjoyment. Flow is used to extend playtime to ensure that players continue to consume the product. Flow, therefore, goes hand in hand with commodification of players, production of data, and the continuing production of product itself. There's no AAA titles now that don't come out with DLCs or sequels, indeed. A Modern Warfare player, you'd be more than familiar with. It's every couple of... again, the most evil example of that would be Electronic Arts, who do this all the time. So flow is actually a mechanism used to keep us consuming. I can sit here, like I've told you a few times, the game I'm playing at the moment is Far Cry 6. Guess what? That's the 6th Far Cry I've played. It's kept me consuming these games, So, flow is also coupled with addiction. The concept of video game addiction really comes from effective use of the mechanics of flow. Unquestionably here. Video game addiction isn't a chemical sort of effect, if you like. It's not like heroin addiction. Video game addiction is far more like gambling addiction, which is when an external stimulus, which doesn't affect us chemically or biologically, provokes a level of arousal that we continue to seek to enjoy over time. If we are addicted to a game, I can think of a few examples in the past where I'd be like, yeah, I think that was an addiction. I kind of like, I'm going to get home early from work today because I want to play, and then we'll play through to like 2 in the morning and wake up the next day zombified. And repeat for about 2 weeks. I've been in that position. It's a real thing. I think probably a number of us in this room have felt that with different things over time as well. There's no question in my mind that addiction comes from optimal use of the flow mechanism and creating that optimal level of arousal for us, so we keep wanting to repeat that situation. So it's a marketable ideology as well, because you can market something in terms of it's incredibly addictive. This is done frequently with video games, done frequently with mobile games in particular, where things are literally marketed on, wow, this is how many people are playing this all the time. This is really what Candy Crush does in a big way. And weirdly, Nintendo used to do it all the time. Nintendo's primary marketing tool throughout the 90s and early 2000s is, our games are incredibly addictive. They did it in a big way with the Wii. It's like, if you buy the Wii and play Wii Sports, this is all you will do. How's that a good thing? Are you trying to tell me that being addicted to something is good? Okay. It was no surprise that Nintendo marketed the Game Boy in 1989 with everyone got a free copy of Tetris. There's a hell of a lot of people who bought Game Boys, and they sold 140 million of them, who never bought another game. Literally about 25 million people never actually bought a game for the Game Boy. They just played Tetris on it. Incredibly addictive experience. So when we go for in terms of the ideological content of these things, if we go with the flow, we do not pause to consider the reasons for our actions. We immerse ourselves in reality, releasing the blockages of indecision, evaluation, and worry. We stop being critical thinkers in the process of flow. If we are a flowing subject, we're not engaging in critique, we're not engaging in... There's two sides to this. Sometimes it's good to switch off. There's something worthwhile about this. There's a reason why tonight, when I go home, first thing I do is maybe the second or third thing I do is put on my PlayStation and have an hour. It'll just unlock the day for me. It plays a really important therapeutic role in my life, that I can sit for an hour, be there for an hour, then come out of it. But in itself, if that's primarily what we're doing, we're being unthinking subjects, that's not great. It's not great, for example, in the context of what you do primarily as students, where you should be critically engaged with things and critically looking at the world itself. I guess this is, an abandonment, as Hendrik says, not just of, interest in what their actions may bring in times to come. It's so good to be playing video games. Well, how's that going to... It's just like, my parents used to say this to me all the time. You spend ages playing Road Rash, what are you going to become? Fucking loser, probably. And they were right. But you can see, how is this going to be helpful if we're in a continually sort of non-reflective mode? Do we become non-reflective citizens? Do we just accept what's given to us? Is Donald Trump the product of flow? Is Liz Truss I don't know what Liz Truss is the product of some horrendous fucking experiment that went badly wrong, as far as I can see. But is 12 years of Conservative rule in the United Kingdom the product of prioritising flow experiences? That we don't think critically about the world around us, that we just you might think I'm extrapolating from a very small thing, but as I'm trying to say, flow is very important in video games, and it has moved into different things as well. And if our continual search is to meet those flow experiences, it does necessarily mean that we don't want to do difficult things like think critically about politics or society or poverty, etc. That we don't want to engage with these things because they ostensibly break the flow relationship that we could have with other stuff in life. So in media theory itself, we would argue that flow creates a particular subject position, and when we look at that subject position, what is the person in flow, it does look kind of problematic. That this is somebody who's engaged to such an extent with a singular experience that they are disengaged from so many other things. When you pose it like that, I think it starts to become a more problematic thing ideologically. And as my old boss, Helen, would say, God bless Helen Kennedy, really nice woman, I made her life a living hell. I'm so sorry, Helen. If she's watching this, Helen, I'm really sorry. And we get on okay now, but oh my god, I made that woman's life miserable. So, as Helen says, we would benefit from ideological examinations of how games focus subjects and subject control that are beyond our intentional control. Helen wrote a very important book on video games in 2006 with John Dovey, and in that book they outline how video games mask the subject position we're put in. So the enjoyment of the game kind of hides the fact that we're being put in a particular way of looking at the world itself. And if they do that successfully, we'll start accepting a way of looking at the world, which we don't critically interrogate because it's not been visible to us to critically interrogate that. And Helen relates the notion of flow. So it's not about a state of perfect control, but a submission to technology itself. And I think that's a very powerful way of doing it. And you know, this is why I think Helen's great, and I'm really, really sorry for making her life miserable for 2 years. But she shouldn't have hired me in the first place. I mean, it was obvious in the interview I was going to be a prick. I mean, poor Richard. I mean, he has to put up with me. Poor guy. So, flow doesn't force us to experience flow. Game design encourages us to do this, and if it does that, we become subservient to the game, to the technology, to the interface itself. We stop being a critical subject. We start being, if you like, a controlled subject. This now starts to sound much less like something we actually want to be in. And if you look, you know, as I said earlier, the promotion of individuality. I know I've got a lot on the slides, but again, as usual, these things are things that you can go away and look at. Scalp and use, pick up, and so on. I just want to change tack a little bit because flow really describes, for me, immersion. Immersion as a state of being. Immersion, for me, is all about one word, focus. If we are immersed, we are focused in a particular way. Our attention is focused towards a particular object or experience or way of understanding if we're in an immersed state. Now, Brown and Keynes do some good work here in talking about moving from immersion to presence. What I want to argue slightly at the end of this lecture is that we can start positioning flow as one thing in a process which we move in between. That there is more than immersion, that we can feel present in games, that if certain conditions are met, we move from feeling immersed to feeling embodied, to feeling present in a virtual world, which a game can be. Virtual worlds can sometimes be problematic as a term, because we think, okay, what does that mean? Are you talking about Facebook? Are you talking about Second Life or VR chat or something like that? No. A virtual world is an environment that we think of as a world that is virtual. So it could be any video game as far as I'm concerned. And really what I want to do here is try and give a hierarchy of things where flow is an important part of the bottom, but instead of it being the be-all and end-all and therefore being ideologically problematic, we can position it in a way that it's less problematic because it allows us to access different states of engagement with things. So immersion, unfortunately, is not a very well-defined concept. The idea of being immersed in something, because immersion is used in different fields, it has different meanings and it's can be very problematic. But Csikszentmihalyi's theory has been positioned as a theory of immersion by others. We can also think of it not as fixed in a certain way. Immersion is a hybrid, dynamic and interactive phenomenon of convergence and divergence to the state of immersion, so it can be more than just being bang, I am immersed. And that would emphasise the role of the individual in the construction of immersion, and I think that's where I come from. When we feel immersed, we bring things with us. It's not just a state that a game is made and it's like, ooh, I'm in, just by playing it. We have to enter playing that game with something. We have to, if you like, feel as we're playing it, I want to be immersed in this. And that want, that intention towards being immersed, can be a number of different things. It can be interest in the game itself. It can be past experiences of playing similar kinds of games. It can be expectations that you've got from other people. Somebody says, oh yeah, I'm playing this game, I've been playing it for hours and hours and hours, it's amazing. So, oh, right. And then I feel positively disposed towards playing it right from the outset because somebody has told me it's going to be good. You know, or the subject matter is something that I want to be part of. You know, we know Ben is deeply problematic as an individual, right? He likes games where he can go around killing people. This matches with Ben's general interests outside of games as well, where he spends his weekends going around killing people. Yeah, so the game state matches up with Ben's personal life, basically. He does, you know, go around valleys, towns with a machine gun, indiscriminately killing children. And that's fine, I support him, you know, because he's my friend, you know, and I want him to enjoy. And he's not causing anyone any harm, really. So, if we take Thon's example of immersion as kind of attentional focus, an immersive shift of attention that goes in hand with the situation that we're in, I think immersion becomes a less problematic thing. What I'm emphasising here is Csikszentmihalyi's theory is still useful because it describes a mechanism. But before we consider that mechanism, if we want to get rid of some of the more problematic ideological aspects of it, we need to think about us and who we are and what we bring to flow experiences. And this then starts to unpick flow because it's a psychological theory. One of the assumptions that psychological theories make is that we're all the same. The psychology basically treats human beings as other bits of science treat elements or cells or, you know, the stuff that scientists, atoms and all this shit, right? You know what scientists do, yeah? If Csikszentmihalyi is correct from a psychological perspective, we all kind of feel the same flow experiences for the same games. So, did anyone in week one go and play some of those classic video games that I put up? Cheska, what did you play?
We played some of Doom, didn't we?
You played the 3D original Doom?
Yeah.
So weird.
Why? Why was it weird?
It's just so pointy. And
Pointy.
do you know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't immersive in any way.
Was right, perfect. It wasn't immersive. That's brilliant. Your reasons for feeling that are your own. I suspect that they're closely related to the very strange way of actually controlling it, which is feels so counterintuitive, right? Visually, it's a mess. I mean, it's retinally burning bad in these days, right? I can tell you in '93, that was like the most immersive thing you could have played. It was people were playing Doom flat out. I mean, and within that there were real problems with it. Now, Csikszentmihalyi's theory here is it runs into a problem. How did, in '93, so many people find that an immersive experience? And in 2022, 30 years on, it's like, no, this is horrible. I don't want to play this game. It looks bad. It plays bad. The sound is like, ugh. There's those grunts and moans. It's like, this is like a really, really cheaply made porno. You know, it's like, this is not good. And the theory itself is going to find this really, really problematic because it poses that flow is a paradigmatic thing. People will. This is a flowing experience. Therefore, if I give it to you now, you're going to find it flowing again because people flowed in the past with it. It doesn't work that way. You come with a completely different set of experiences, expectations, cultural references, knowledge, abilities to use technology. The reason why you find it difficult to play is not because the controls are bad, it's because they're too simple. That's the weird thing. The controls back in '93 for a game like that, now you're more sophisticated. You're actually having to de-skill. That can be really, really difficult to de-skill yourself from doing something. That's why sometimes when we play a game straight up, and we haven't played something in that genre perhaps before, or it's on a different console, we're actually having to de-skill, we're having to dissemble our play skills in order to match this new thing. That's why I hate playing on PC. I've never really done it. I've played a few things on PC over the years, but it's never been I've always been a console player. For more than 30 years, I am totally a console player. That means I don't get the full gamer experience. I'll admit to that. Right? But secondly, it does illustrate to me that the reason I can't do this is because I have to dissemble 30 years worth of experience of holding controllers in a particular way. And it's too ingrained. I can't do it. I cannot get my fingers, I can touch type, but I can't play games on a keyboard. Work that one out. Because the way I'm wired to control that thing on the screen is totally different to what this asks me to do. I just can't do it. Now, interestingly, I play a lot of games on a laptop at home now, but with a controller. Because I cannot do it without a controller. I've had to buy controllers to do this. And I've had to buy, weirdly, PlayStation ones. You know, ones that mimic the shape and form of PlayStation controllers, because over nearly 30 years, that's what I've been using, basically. I did Xbox 360 for that generation, and I still find that controller weird. I really find, although it's got a really satisfying thud when you throw it. Much better than PlayStation. It's more solid, you know. You can put holes in things when you throw an Xbox one. I do like that. So, we bring stuff. Again, too long, didn't listen. We bring shit to stuff, okay? That's really what I'm getting at here. So, immersion. According to Ryan, directed intentional consciousness that relates to another world and reorganizes the universe of being around that world. So, again, key word here, intentional. We are intentional subjects in immersion. We want. It's not something which is projected on us. It is something we want to go towards. Big difference to flow, where we start doing something and all of a sudden we're subsumed by the experience. If we bring intentionality into it, that Mason, you want to have that feeling in Oregon Trail. Now, another game which actually takes a while to get to that point, but you can get there fairly quickly as well. So in addition to these things, we can think of immersion in terms of temporal, spatio-temporal, emotional immersion, ludic immersion, social immersion, and perceptual environmental immersion. One other thing I would add to that, which I haven't added to the slide, is the idea of co-presence as a form of immersion, which is often overlooked in games, but if you play with other people, co-presence is a really important immersive aspect. The idea that even though you are spatially and temporally distant from one another, in the game space you are together with one another and interacting in real time. That is an important aspect of thinking about immersion too. So I'm actually going to skip over that because I need to finish, because I talked too much. In terms of immersion, obviously, is a big thing in virtual reality. Slater and Wilb argue immersion is the degree to which VR projects stimuli onto the sensory receptors of VR users in a way that is extensive, matching, surrounding, vivid, interactive, and plot-forming. There's something wrong with this idea about immersion here. I mean, I've posed the question, is this useful? All I'm going to say is, this again is all about stuff doing things to you, about effect. About, here's a thing and it's going to affect you in a particular way and you're going to feel immersed in it. Without considering, you bring stuff to the party too. And that, for me, that kind of view of immersion is always problematic. Now, immersion for me is one stage of achieving a different goal, which is embodiment. Embodiment is starting to move towards the idea of being present in an environment. When we feel embodied, like we're controlling something, that is a step along immersion. And the reason why I differentiate them is you can feel immersed without embodying something. Tetris, you don't embody anything. You know, if you're playing Space Invaders or Pac-Man, you're not embodying the little spaceship or Pac-Man. In a lot of game states, we don't embody anything at all. So embodiment is considered very often, you know, a given of being immersed in a video game. But if you think critically about video games, very often we're not embodying anything. You know, if you're driving a car in Grand Theft Auto, you're not embodying the car. What are you embodying at that point? Nothing really. It's almost like as soon as the player gets in, the avatar gets in the car, you stop the embodiment relation and you're doing a different kind of activity. So we should separate out immersion and embodiment. Embodiment is a higher level principle going on here. And as soon as you start doing that, then you start to position immersion for me and flow in the proper way. Flow is a way of moving you towards feeling a sense of embodiment. But embodiment is a higher order condition. It's something that we get, perhaps we need to be in a flow state to feel it, but it doesn't necessarily do that. It's not sufficient for us to feel embodiment. But basically embodiment is the feeling of self-location in something. Presence is higher level again. For me, to feel present in the world is not just to feel immersed and embodied in it, but to feel that the world that you're in makes sense. That the things that you do and the way that you see it, presence is actually something deeper than just playing. It is an environment in which has fully rounded world qualities. You can exist there, ostensibly. I am not arguing at any point here that all games do this. In fact, I would say the conditions of presence can't be met by many games at all. And they don't necessarily have to be open world games to do it either, but it's something which is very rarely achieved, I would argue. But when we feel spatially present in an environment, we are unthinking, the world feels natural, we can see through that, we basically lose all relationship with the technology we're using and the mediation of that environment. We feel part of that world itself. These things, unfortunately, are used interchangeably. So I'm going to try and simplify them out because my entire critique of flow depends on doing this. Immersion means focus. Embodiment means control. Presence means what we call a hermeneutic understanding, the feeling of being in that place because it feels like home. That we feel so comfortable in something that it feels like we're there. Has anyone got any game experience which matches that kind of feeling? Has anyone ever felt, I'm here? And it's okay if you haven't.
Maybe VR in the future, but I really haven't had that total sense of immersion.
No Overwatch, anything like that? They would be the games that would scream out to me that the possibilities of doing this exist. Would be things like Overwatch.
Maybe Rainbow Six Siege. That's probably like the closest I've come.
Why in particular?
Just because it, although it doesn't like feel real, like obviously I wouldn't be in that situation ever at all in my life.
We hope.
I hope, yeah. It kind of felt more like sport than an actual game itself, because of how competitive it was and how you were like working in a team and communicating in the like.
That's interesting.
Timing.
Presence involves co-presence. I think that would be my first thing. I don't think it's possible for individual games. to get to this stage. Even something as kind of deeply immersive as Red Dead Redemption 2, I didn't feel present in that world. Now, I'm detached from it in a particular way. I'm not interacting with other people. Now, playing it online with other people, I also never felt that feeling of presence, because the online world of it isn't particularly very convincing, quite frankly. The same problem that GTA 5 has online, or GTA Online is. It's cartoon life. It's not real in any particular sense. Maybe games at this stage still grappling with that sense of presence. But I am genuinely surprised that nobody, considering I know there's people who play it, haven't mentioned things like The Sims. Because that is a mechanism that I can imagine is very, very directed towards presence. The idea of building, as you said earlier, Jordan, you know, the deeply flow experience comes from that process of building and creating. And when you start extrapolating the build and creation to wider than just your Sims, building other things as well, you are ostensibly building the world itself. So the world starts to feel like home because you've made it that way. So that kind of game mechanism screams to me that presence could come from that sense. We can say, Morgan.
Minecraft. That
Has anyone played it to a sufficient degree?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel, I mean, a perfect example of it, I would say as well, because you kind of preempted where I'm going now, which is great. Minecraft would be almost the quintessential presence experience. You move from a focus on building things to a feeling of embodied control of the world itself, to having created something which literally was kind of the purpose of Minecraft, is to feel at home in it. The mechanism of it almost goes through those stages in a logical order. And there's no surprise, you know, what do we know about Minecraft? Biggest selling game of all time, biggest revenues of a game of all time, most players of all time, and most continual players. Players play Minecraft longer than players have played any game previously, and consistently. It's like the idea with Minecraft in about 2015 was it was going to drop off a cliff, because 2010 it came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had kids who've been playing it for like 5 years, and so kids are going to hit like 17, 16, 15. They're going to discover, you know, booze and fags, or whatever kids do these days, crystal meth and banging, whatever the fuck kids do these days, right? And they're going to lose interest in building in Minecraft. That's not happened. That really hasn't happened. People are playing Minecraft into their 20s in the same kind of ways. It's really, really interesting, and I think because there's a genuine sense of, you start a Minecraft server, it's yours. You're building your virtual homestead, if you like. This is a term used by Howard Reigold in the 1990s about, you know, life in virtual communities, building the virtual homestead. You know.
That reminds me, during lockdown, me and my friends got a realm and we all started it together. And the whole lockdown, all we would do was just work on our little Minecraft world, and it consumed all of our lives. And
because you felt present there, Jessica.
Yeah, because we built a community together, you know.
And I think building is a vital thing. Morgan, what are you going to say?
I also really love how Minecraft has been used for like assignments and stuff. Like that,
I'd crossed my
media
mind to
cultures.
do a Minecraft assignment for this, but it only crossed my mind for 5 minutes, because I don't think it's fair to ask people to play things that, you know, has anyone never played Minecraft? There you go. Okay, so we'd be excluding Jess and Eve, and I wouldn't have a problem with excluding Jess and Eve, but fucking university would, basically. So yeah, it's, you know, but that's where I'm getting at here now. Are you immersed? Oh yes, you are immersed, but there's more. I don't think flow quite captures how the control element, and it's particularly how that present element is. All Flow's doing it is telling us this is a pleasurable experience, because we've got this matrix that matches up. What Flow in particular can't do is explain why it was so good to feel present in that environment with those other people. Because it's not part of Flow as a theory. It's all individual, right? But a lot of what was good about that, Cheska, was, I'm assuming, and contradict me if I'm wrong, being in that space with those other people. Yeah. Flow doesn't offer us any explanation of that. It's literally like, you know, ooh, you're feeling aroused, you've got some skills. Okay, well you could shoehorn that co-presence into that arousal state, but all that's doing is minimising the importance of it rather than actually drawing it out as something that we can think of as being a very important aspect of our experience, which I think is problematic. It minimises importance rather than accentuates the importance of it. This isn't my idea. Okay, first of all, I want to say that. Okay, so Don Ide, who's a post-phenomenologist, theorist of technology, I'm basically stealing a little bit of his here. So Ide says there are three particular relationships we can have with technology. Focal relations, embodiment relations where we have control over them, hermeneutic relations where we see the world through that technology, which really would be a video game relation where we see the world through our interface with it and we don't consider ourselves to be to be separate from things. My thing on the top is presence is all of those things added together. When you feel present, you need all of those relations in place at the same time. And like we were saying, we're struggling to come up with examples of this, and Minecraft is a really good example of how this works. It doesn't happen very often that something can combine, focal relations, embodiment relations, and hermeneutic relations all together in this magic little thing, this magic little gathering, so we feel present in the world. As you say, Morgan, VR is the great aim of virtual reality is to do this. The problem with it is it's a lot harder than people think. And one of the problems with VR, I particularly think, is if you put a headset on people, this will come. It ignores design, and in particular it ignores co-presence, which is the big problem with VR at the moment, because people look so fucking stupid in it. If you look at the way VR, you embody an avatar in VR, it just looks so dumb. It looks like a PlayStation game from 2006. It's really badly done, and you can't feel that in that way. So, I know we've run out of time, so you can go back through this. Just for proof that I have been thinking about this, this is something taken from my book in 2018, about how all these things need to be combined together for us to feel immersed in something. Really, takeaways from today. Flow is a very dominant idea, but I think it's highly contestable. And our route into contesting it is to think about what we bring to experiences. And when we start thinking about that, then we can start to position flow properly as part of a focal relationship with a game where it is how we are drawn in initially, but there are other relationships that we can have with games as well. Most of us will experience embodiment relationships with things. When we get into a game in a particular way that it feels like somewhere we are at home, hermeneutic relation, and if you have those three things in common with one another at the same time, we start to feel this very powerful sense of presence in a virtual world, which doesn't happen often, but it's kind of the aim. That's kind of really what everyone's going for. If you want to build a dystopia, that's what you want. Which is kind of what Mark Zuckerberg is trying to do at the moment with Meta, which is not a great idea. Okay, I'll see you in a fortnight. Not in a week, in a fortnight. Don't forget, I've got Friday open to see people, and I'll see you in about an hour, yeah? I've completely failed in my feedback thing, so I'm supposed to do more question boards and we need to do one. The thought was there. 10 out of 10 for thinking. Minus 7 out of 10.
You know what?
I mean, I might at some point when I film more stuff, that's okay. But like,
Anyone want more cake?
I messaged Nadia and she said,
Get rid of this stuff.
if I only want it, she said I can bring it back tomorrow rather than today.
I
And
can
she
try it, you know.
said then she can see if anyone else needs it, if anyone else wants it.
I see what I can do.
And I said like, we're gonna try